So, have to say again, love Jules's background as we prepare for Purim this evening and tomorrow, and so we can salivate as we are studying Torah this morning. Our portion is Tzav. It's the second portion in the book of Leviticus. And in the Eitz Chaim, we are on page 613. In any other Chumash you're using, it's Leviticus chapter 6, beginning with verse 1. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, shekidshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So, as with all portions in the book of Leviticus, commentators have to scrounge a bit to try to find relevant or deep spiritual meaning in the sacrifices and the laws here, and especially later in the book when we get to laws of ritual purity. The details themselves are pretty graphic, and what happens with the sacrifice is also very detailed, and you kind of lose sight of the bigger picture of what these sacrifices are supposed to teach us. So we talked a little bit last week about the meaning of sacrifice, and just in a more spiritual way. And here in this week's portion, Tzav, again 613 in the Eitz Chaim, we'll see what the commentaries have to say about it. So let me just read the first couple of verses in the Hebrew. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses, saying, Tzav et Aharon v'et banav lemor. Command Aaron and his sons, saying, Zot Torat ha'olah. This is the Torah, or these are the laws, or it says here in the Eitz Chaim, this is the ritual. So I think it's more than ritual, because Torah at least can be translated as Torah, but also it can be instruction or commandments. So I guess that leads to saying it could be ritual, but if we want to be more literal about it, these are the laws of the Olah, which is the burnt offering. Hi ha'olah, this is the Olah, al mokdah, al hamizbeach, kol halayla. So the burnt offering that should stay on its place on the altar all night, ad haboker, until the morning, the eish hamizbeach to kadbo, and the fire on the altar should be kept going on it. Okay, so just a little note here, the mem of the word mokdah, which in the Eitz Chaim, it's the last line of the Hebrew, first word on the line, has an asterisk next to it, just pointing out that the mem is written smaller than the other letters. And in every Torah scroll, that's how it has to be done. It won't be a kosher Torah unless the mem is written smaller. Why it's written smaller, we don't know. There are just certain scribal traditions that are maintained in the writing of the Torah scroll, so it has to be done that way. So the asterisk just refers, in the small print under the Hebrew there in the Eitz Chaim, it says mem with an apostrophe next to the M, so that just means the letter mem, ze'ira, small, lefi nusachim mekubalim, according to accepted versions. So in other words, that's just the editorial note to tell us that small mem you'll find in every single Torah scroll. and no matter what are the traditions of how the Torah scroll is written. Okay, so there's commentary below the line about this burnt offering and how it needs to, the fire on the altar needs to be kept burning all night. So if we just look below the line here, the fire on the altar is kept going on it, right? Keep the fire going. The last Hebrew word can also be read within him. So the Eish HaMizbeach Tukad Bo, the fire of the altar should be kept going. That's what it's. That's how it's understood. But it could be meant that the fire on the altar should be kept inside of him. So, right, if this commandment is for Aaron and his sons, the fire on the altar should be kept burning inside. It's a stretch to see it that way, to translate it that way, but it can be. So the last Hebrew word can also be read within him. This prompted the comment that the fire on the altar must be paralleled by a fire in the heart of the officiating priest, whose enthusiasm for the sacred nature of the work must never be lost. Okay, so again, here we have a homiletic idea about the sacrifices and the ritual of bringing the sacrifice, so that it shouldn't become rote, it shouldn't be habit. Oh, just bringing another sacrifice today. Here's just going through the motions. It should be that every single sacrifice that's offered needs to be done with passion, with the appropriate intention, etc. So the idea of the fire kept burning inside every single day, every single ritual that the Kohanim are doing needs to have that fire behind it. Okay, and then the commentary concludes: the congregation, for its part, must recognize its responsibility to see that the enthusiasm and dedication of the clergy is never extinguished. Okay, so now rabbis edited this Eitz Chaim. So this is a comment from rabbis about how it's not just the officiant who needs to have the fire burning, but the congregation needs to keep the fire burning and to support the clergy to ensure that they have the wherewithal to keep the fire burning. Okay, so it's, in other words, that the comment here is suggesting that the congregation needs to help the clergy be dedicated and make sure that the fire doesn't get extinguished. Okay, so just pointing out again, rabbis edited the Eitz Chaim, one of whom, Rabbi David Wolpe, who's a noted pulpit rabbi in Los Angeles. So just having that kind of pulpit experience, clergy experience coming into the commentary. The other note about this, about how the fire is kept burning all night, is that this is a source also for the evening service. So I had talked in the prayer book Hebrew class this past Sunday about how we pray 3 times a day to remind us of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also to remind us of sacrifices. There was at least one regular morning sacrifice that was brought, at least one afternoon sacrifice that was brought. No sacrifices were brought in the evening, but the fire was kept burning on the altar all night. So for those 3 reasons, for those 3 times of day, we pray 3 times a day. So we either pray to remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or we pray to remember the sacrifice, and how prayer today is a substitute for the sacrifice. So this just gets to, as we're reading the whole book of Leviticus, the question can be, we haven't offered sacrifices in 2,000 years. Why do we really need to keep on reading about this? Are we ever going to offer sacrifices again? Okay, and modern liberal Jews rightly ask this question. and I would say liberal in that non-Orthodox Jews can ask the question about whether we really are hoping for the day when sacrifices are going to be offered in the temple again. So the conservative movement officially in the prayer book, ever since we used that black prayer book, right? If you remember the black prayer book that we used to use a long time ago, that every conservative synagogue used to use, which was published in 1946, called the Silverman prayer book, because Rabbi Morris Silverman was the editor with the editorial committee of that prayer book. And there was clearly, it was accepted by the conservative movement, a couple of liturgical changes that were made from the traditional prayer book to that one. And the major change was to omit the reference in the Musaf service to looking forward to the sacrifices being offered again, right? So in the Musaf service of Shabbat and holidays, in the traditional prayer book, it says, Na'aseh v'nakriv. We will do and we will offer sacrifice. And in the conservative prayer book and Silverman and every prayer book since, Asu v'hikrivu. So it's changed from the future tense to the past tense, that we remember how they did and offered the sacrifices. Okay, so it's a subtle change, one that we don't even think about anymore since it was made in 1946, and we just are used to this liturgy. We only know the difference if we pay attention and go to an Orthodox synagogue. In an Orthodox synagogue, we'll note the difference, but in a non-Orthodox synagogue, it's in the past tense. So that says something, that we're still looking forward to the temple being rebuilt, but we're only remembering how sacrifices were brought. We're not looking forward to sacrifices being offered again. So there's something about the centrality of the temple, the unifying force that the temple can be for the entire Jewish community, that we would look forward to, but there's a limit beyond which non-Orthodox Jews aren't willing to go, and that is to protest the resumption of sacrifices. Now, all of this will happen when the Messiah comes. All right, so will the Messiah come? Well, we hope for it every Saturday night when we sing Havdalah and we sing Eliyahu Hanavi. We're hoping for the Messiah to come this week. Okay, Messiah hasn't come yet, but there's still 2 more days until Shabbos, and then there's another week when we can hope again that the Messiah will come. And that's an ongoing hope of the Jewish people for the Messiah, especially, with Purim and the book of Esther highlighting this, our long history of dealing with anti-Semitism and slaughter and massacre because we're Jews. There's a reason why we're looking forward to the Messianic age, when there'll be a time of peace and tranquility in the world, and we won't be attacked anymore for being Jewish, and other people won't be attacked for being different. All right, so that's a worthy ideal to pray for and to strive for, because bringing the Messiah also involves trying to do our best and encouraging as many people as possible to do their best. If we can live up to our potential of being a good person, and we can encourage other people to be good people, then we can do our part in bringing the Messianic age. Okay, so that's, for a religious idea, perfectly appropriate and spiritual. But to restore sacrifices, not so sure. I certainly would not be looking forward to offering sacrifices again. And if they were being offered, not sure I'd want to be part of that service. It's gross, disgusting, and I think we've evolved beyond offering animals, slaughtering animals in the name of God. Okay, it's one thing to still be a carnivore. It's another to then slaughter animals as part of Jewish worship. Okay, so that all of that raises the question, why are we still reading the book of Leviticus? And I think by reading these rabbinic commentaries that go along with it, we see the more relevant homiletical messages surrounding the sacrifices, rather than focusing on the details of the sacrifice itself. Right. So the purpose of reading this book is not to be reminded of how to offer sacrifices, but rather be connected to the spirituality behind bringing the sacrifice. Yes, Lori.
Yeah, I like reading Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. So
Yes.
I read his commentary for every parsha, and one of something he said about sacrifice was, he was looking back at that era of sacrifice, that people sacrifice what they love, because it's about closeness and love.
Right.
And so in that era, that was what people loved. They were, that kind of society. In our era, he gave an example, money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So I got the impression from that, although I can't say this for sure, that maybe he would not be wild about going back to sacrifices.
Well,
but
so
I can't say that.
may he rest in peace. He was an Orthodox rabbi.
Yes.
So an Orthodox rabbi would have to ideologically admit that they're praying for the restoration of sacrifices.
Mhm.
If an Orthodox rabbi would say they are no longer praying for the restoration of sacrifices, then in some way they are saying they are no longer Orthodox.
Mm.
Okay, because it's part and parcel of what it means to subscribe to Orthodox ideology. However, not a cop-out, but at least you can, all Orthodox rabbis can admit, okay, if you're not really buying into the restoration of sacrifices, there's really nothing to worry about, because really, is the Messiah going to come in our lifetime? So it's nothing that we really have to worry about anytime soon. So that's how some Orthodox rabbis could get around it. Now, the other thing about sacrificing money, it's just another idea that Rabbi Sacks brings, along with many other noted Jewish thinkers and commentators, about how to make this relevant today. When we try to connect with God, the connection to God isn't just from a spiritual, emotional perspective. That reading the book of Leviticus, it also involves giving something of yourself in the attempt to try to connect with God, right? So it's not a matter of going to a convent or going to a monastery or going out to the desert on a long meditation kind of experience in order to try to, or to have some kind of mystical experience at home or in nature somewhere in order to try to get close to God. It's also, according to Leviticus, about bringing something of yourself in the process. So that it's a valuable message, and I think it's an important message for everyone today. We can't take for granted that we can call up a connection to God whenever we want. There's something, it's a difficult process. It should be a challenging process to do. Okay, so so that's why, for these reasons that we're reading below the line in the commentary, and we come up with reasons ourselves, we make the book relevant. And I would never advocate for not reading the book of Leviticus anymore as part of the service. I would never advocate that. However, in Reformed synagogues, there are many Reformed synagogues that do not read from the book of Leviticus at all because of that. Okay, so that's the fire on the altar. There's also on the next page is verse 3. The very top of 6:14, chapter 6, verse 3. Velavash hakohen mido vad u'michnasei vad yilbash al besaro. So the priest shall dress in linen raiment, with linen breeches next to his body. Veherim et hadeshen asher tochal ha'esh, and he should lift up the ashes and that the fire has consumed et ha'olah, from the offering al hamizbeach on the altar, v'samo etzel hamizbeach, and he should put it next to the altar. Okay, so it's clear and it's interesting that the priest has to dress up special in order to clear the ashes from the altar and place the ashes next to the altar. And then he takes off ufashada begadav, he takes off his clothes, velavash begadim achirim, and he puts on other clothes, vehotzi et hadeshen, and he takes the ashes el michutz lamachaneh, and so he takes out the ashes outside of the camp, el makom tahor, to a pure place. Okay, so he's dressed one way to clean the ashes, and then he dresses in a different way to take the ashes out of the sanctuary, outside of the camp, to a pure place. So the question is, why? Why deal that way with these ashes? It's dirt. It's, in other words, when we have a barbecue in the summertime, and I like to use charcoal instead of a gas grill, so you got to clean out the charcoal from the barbecue before you start a new fire. So I certainly wouldn't dress up special to clean out my grill. In fact, I'd have to be careful of how the ash cloud spreads, and I don't get any ashes on myself, because you can get pretty dirty from cleaning the ashes. So here, these linen garments, they're white garments, so they're going to get dirty pretty quickly, but he has to wear these special garments for cleaning the ashes. Why? So below the line, for verse 3, the first act of the Cohen every morning is to put on ordinary clothes and remove the ashes of the previous night's sacrifice. This ensures that he never forgets his link to the ordinary people who spend their days in mundane pursuits. Okay, so one thing is, why are these Kohanim, who are designated by God for this sacred purpose, why are they cleaning up? Why isn't there a separate janitorial staff, right? Hire a cleaning service to do this. Why are the Kohanim themselves, who are trained special in all of the rituals, why are they cleaning up? So this commentator, Simcha Bunim, a rabbi from a couple of centuries ago, suggests that it's important for the Kohanim, these special people, to have to do mundane things themselves. That it helps them maintain a humble spirit, and that's important too for leaders of the community. That nothing should be too beneath them to do, and that even cleaning the ashes is part of the worship service. There's the pageantry of offering the sacrifice, and then there's the dirty work of cleaning up after, but the dirty work of cleaning up after is all part of the worship system too. And that the Kohen shouldn't think that it should be beneath him to do it. That's one comment about it. The other is, why were the ashes treated with such reverence, right? Why were the ashes placed in a pure place outside of the community, right? Why just dumped somewhere in an ash pile? Because it symbolizes the idea that what was holy yesterday must be treated with respect today as well. Once holy, always holy. And so even the ashes, when this animal is no longer recognizable, it's ashes now. Still, even though you don't recognize it as an animal anymore, it still has purity and sanctity and has to be treated that way even when it's buried. Okay, so these are important points too, and I think that could apply to every kind of worship service. And I actually enjoy doing the menial parts of the job. Of like I have here in my office. I am in my office. These are real books behind me. I have here the bin of the Megillas, the booklets for the service tonight. and I get pleasure out of rolling the Torah to the for the special readings on Shabbat. So I like, and when we were without a building for 5 years, I was the one to schlep all the food for Kiddush every Friday to either Cashel Elementary or the only theater where we had the rental space. So all of those menial tasks I was happy to do, and I enjoyed doing them. And it's all part of the job. Happy Purim, Rita. Good to see you. Take care. So yeah, so some, in larger synagogues where there's much more staff available, the rabbis usually are not involved in rolling the Torah or making sure that the Megillah booklets of the Book of Esther and the evening service are in their place. Somebody else is in charge of that stuff. But anyway, it's all part of the job, and it's all part of what I see as part of the job, and I find it all part of the holy task of making sure that our worship service is accessible and available to everyone. Along the lines of humility of the Cohen for the work that they do with the cleaning of the ashes, there's also this other idea that we find on verse 13. So if we go to page 615, chapter 6, verse 12, Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God spoke to Moses saying, Zeh korban Aharon uvanav, this is the sacrifice of Aaron and his sons, asher yakrivu ladonai, that they will offer to God, by biyom himashachoto, on the day that he, Aaron, and then his sons get anointed as Kohanim. Right? What are they supposed to bring as a special anointment ceremony? And we'll read about that in next week's portion. What are they supposed to bring? Asirit ha'efa solet mincha, a tenth of an ephah, which is just a measure of grain, of choice flour, as a regular grain offering, half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. So you would think on the day that you get anointed as a priest and start to work, you're just bringing a little bit of flour in the morning and a little bit of flour in the afternoon or in the evening. Why not something more special to bring? Why are you bringing flour? So below the line, as a regular grain offering, the daily grain, so it's not just on the day of his anointed, but every day the Kohen should be bringing this, apparently. The daily grain offering of the high priest taught the poor not to be ashamed of their grain offering, which was the same size. Right? So we're told that if you can't afford to bring an animal, can't afford to bring a bird, you can bring a handful of grain. So you might feel self-conscious about doing that. Like if you're waiting in line to bring an offering and you're standing behind somebody who has a sheep, and you're standing in front of somebody who has a turtle dove, and here you are with just a handful of grain, you might feel out of place. You might feel embarrassed. I don't know. Am I worthy? All I have is this handful of grain. So perhaps instead, the high priest who brings every day this handful of grain is to teach this humility and to teach everyone that no matter what you're bringing, it's okay. Even a handful of grain is acceptable, because look at the high priest. The high priest is bringing a handful of grain too, right? So it's a matter of the egalitarian nature of all of these, of the worship service itself. Don't let the worship service go to your head if you're a Kohen. Don't feel embarrassed if you're a regular Israelite about what you're bringing. Everything that you bring is okay and is acceptable, because you just have to look to the Kohen themselves for that lesson. Okay. So let's go on to Yeah. So the beginning of the third Aliyah is chapter 7, verse 11, which is on page 617. And here, this is the Thanksgiving offering, not for the holiday of Thanksgiving, but a todah, a thanks offering that one brings to be grateful for something. If you're grateful for something that happened in your life, you would bring this offering. So verse 11, 617, chapter 7, verse 11, V'zot Torat Zevach Hashlamim Asher Yakriv Ladonai. This is the ritual of the sacrifice of well-being that one may offer to the Lord. Im al todah yakrivenu. So if you're bringing it for thanks, the hikriv al zevach hatodah, he shall offer together with the sacrifice of thanksgiving chalot, matzot, bilulot, vashemen. He should offer unleavened cakes with oil mixed in. Urikike matzot meshuchim bashamen, unleavened wafers spread with oil. Besolet morbechet, and cakes of choice flour. Chalot bilulot bashemen, with oil mixed in, well soaked. Okay, now it doesn't say what you're thankful for, but if you're bringing something of which you're bringing thanks offering, this is what the offering is. So the question for the rabbis is, what would be the occasion for bringing the Thanksgiving offering? Right? What would be the occasion? The Torah doesn't tell us what the occasion is. What would be the occasion? So below the line, an individual brings an offering of thanksgiving in response to having been spared from disaster, which produces probably one of the most profound emotions that a person will ever know. So we know from the Mishnah, from the rabbis of the Mishnah from 2,000 years ago, 1,800 years ago, that it's, if you're spared from disaster, then you would bring the Todah sacrifice. The Talmud identifies the circumstances in which a person, now we're below on 618, should bring a Todah. When one has safely completed a dangerous journey, recovered from illness, been released from confinement, or survived other dangers. Okay? And the next sentence, the custom continues to this day in the Gomel blessing offered in the synagogue during the Torah reading by a worshiper who has avoided or survived misfortune. Right? So there is still a ritual opportunity for people to express gratitude to God for having survived disaster in coming to synagogue on a Torah reading day and receiving an honor at the Torah and reciting the special Gomel blessing. So I'm just pulling a prayer book off the shelf and just to share with you, on 142 in the Shabbat Sim Shalom is this blessing, which states, so at the intro in the Siddur here, a bracha recited by one who has recovered from a serious illness, returned safely from a long journey, or survived a life-threatening crisis, including childbirth. All right, so this Siddur gives us this. This is a Siddur published in the 1990s, and I'm just curious as to what the Lev Shalem would say, which is a newer prayer book about this. And just a second, let me, here we go. Yeah, so it just says here, this bracha is recited by one who has recovered from a serious illness or survived a life-threatening crisis. And then in the commentary on the side, it says, in thanking God for having been saved from danger and calamity, we are conscious of the fragility of our lives and the gratitude with which we should meet each day of our lives. Okay, so the blessing is, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, hagomel l'chayavim tovot, shegamalani kol tov. Now the Hebrew is a little bit awkward, so it's always been a challenge to translate it. So the Lev Shalem translates it as Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, who bestows goodness on us despite our imperfections. Yeah, so the chayavim is people with imperfections. Tovot, gomel tovot, is bestowing goodness. Okay, so bestowing goodness on us despite our imperfections, and who has treated me so favorably. Okay, so this is a blessing that's been part of the liturgy since the time of the rabbis. So this is what you're saying upon surviving such a life-threatening experience. And then the congregation responds, Mi shigamalcha kol tov, may the one who has shown such favor to you, hu yigmalcha kol tov selah, continue to bestow all that is good upon you forever. Right? So everybody responds, just as you've been saved this one time, may you always have goodness bestowed on you. Okay, so this is something then, you have a sacrifice that was offered to express gratitude to God for surviving disaster. Now there's a prayer to do that as a direct substitute for that. So it's one of the few things that still is part of the liturgy from the time of the temple or from the time of the Torah until today. So instead of bringing a sacrifice, we'd say this prayer instead. Okay. So that's about the Todah. Yeah, that's all I wanted to share on that. And right. And there's something how something about how the Torah portion ends. Yes. Right. Okay. So let's turn to page 624. I was just looking to see where to start reading in the Hebrew. Let's begin with verse 31. So this is chapter 8, verse 31. It's right in the middle of the seventh Aliyah. 8:31, page 624. Vayomer Moshe el Aharon ve'el banav. Moses said to Aaron and his sons, Bashlu et habasar, cook the meat, or it says here, boil the meat. Petach ohel moed, at the entrance to the tent of meeting. V'sham tochlu oto, there you should eat it. V'et halechem, and the bread, asher b'sal hamiluim, that is in the basket of ordination. Ka'asher tziveti lemor, as I have commanded, saying, to Aharon uvanav yochluhu, Aaron and his sons should eat it. Okay, so this is what they have to eat: the meat and the bread. V'hanotar babasar, and anything that's left over from the meat, uvalechem, and from the bread, ba'esh tisrofu, it should be burned up, consumed in the fire. Whatever you can't eat should just be thrown back into the fire. Umipatach ohel moed lo tetzu, from the entrance of the tent of meeting you should not leave, shivat yamim, for 7 days. You need to stay there for 7 days. Ad yom melot yemei miluechem, until the day that your period of ordination is completed. Ki shivat yamim yemalei yedchem, for your ordination will require 7 days. Okay, why 7 days? 7 days for an ordination of the priests. Why not 1 day, 2 days? Why 7 days? So below the line on 625, 7 days. These days parallel 7 days of creation. The existence of the tabernacle and its capacity to atone for human sinfulness and imperfection make it possible for an imperfect world to survive in the sight of a just God. So in other words, I'll finish the commentary in a moment. There are those thinkers who suggest there's a lot about the Mishkan, the tabernacle itself, that relates to the 7 days of creation, and that's some of the words used in the design of the Mishkan are also used by God in describing the 7 days of creation. So there's that connection between the two, and how God saw how everything every day was good, and was deliberate in building and making everything with the world, so too we're taking care of building the Mishkan and trying to achieve perfection here too. So God's hope was for a perfect world. Our hope is for a perfect world too. And perhaps the Mishkan is the way to, and the rituals that happen in it and the sacrifices in it are a way to make the world a more perfect place. Okay, so the commentary goes on. The Midrash emphasizes that if God demands absolute justice, there can be no world. If God desires a world, there cannot be absolute justice. Right? So that, in other words, there's no black and white. No, the world can't function if it was only functioning black and white. You do something wrong, you're punished right away. There has to be a sense of mercy or leniency in how the world functions and how humanity functions as well. Because if there wasn't any mercy, the world couldn't exist. Okay, so that's what sacrifices come to do, to try to ask God for mercy and to rectify things that the mistakes that we have made intentionally and unintentionally. And so that's another part of the sacrifices here too, to try to make the world, it's a process of tikkun olam, that bringing the sacrifice, especially for sacrifices for guilt offerings or sin offerings, are a chance to make the world a better place, of changing the world, perfecting the world, tikkun olam. That's what the sacrifices are meant to do. Okay, any other thoughts or comments? So we'll stop here for today. I wish everybody tonight.
Rabbi,
Yes,
maybe you should tell people when they get a go mail blessing that they're supposed to give a donation.
Spoken like a true financial vice president and past president of the congregation. Yes, that's right. To give of yourself, besides respond spiritually to the moment in your life. Yes, absolutely. So, well, that's why the letter goes out to everybody in the congregation as a yard site coming up, right? That it's appropriate to make a donation for the yard site too. So yes, it'd be a little bit different if I call somebody up who's in the hospital. Oh, so glad that everything went well with the surgery. Would you consider making a donation? Not sure that that's good bedside manner, but anyway, have a good day, everybody. Happy Purim, everyone, and see you all next Wednesday.
To you as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.